Hello and welcome to Rich Rides. This week I'm going to do something a little bit different. For the last 2 months I've been riding a 50cc moped. So what I thought I'd do is tell you the things I've learned. So I've picked the 5 sort of biggest lessons and things I've learned from riding a 50cc Babetta for the last 2 months. So let's start with number 1. And this is a biggie, and I wasn't sure whether it'd be true when I first got this thing, but you can have fun on anything with an engine, so any sort of motorbike, no matter what size it is and exactly what it is. As you've seen from the pictures, this thing isn't like a sort of traditional motorbike. It's even got pedals. It's not like a scooter. It's like I say, a moped. But I've had loads of fun on it, and it has sort of delivered that fix that I get from riding a motorbike. You do get that same sort of feeling that you get on any motorbike, and that's that feeling of freedom, and that's a huge thing for me. I know lots of other motorcyclists that feel the same way, that just getting out on the bike sort of clears your head and other things just disappear, and it's that feeling of freedom that is one of the massive advantages of riding a bike. On to number 2. So, as a means of local transport, they're actually really good. Even though it's only 50cc's and it only does 30 miles an hour, for just popping around, they're absolutely fine. So, I was in a village in the Czech Republic, and we had friends in the next village. For popping over there was great. I had friends all around, so it was great for that kind of thing. Obviously, longer trips were a bit harder work when you've got the sort of top speed of 30 mile an hour, but even then I did 2 really long trips when we sort of moved house in the Czech. Both times it was about 100 kilometres and took about 3 hours on this, but it was harder work than sort of 1,000 miles in a couple of days that I'd done on a V-Strom in Scotland on the sort of big adventure bike. But it just shows that anything's possible, really, and it felt like an adventure. So that's the other thing, that they can do everything, but as sort of local transport, which is what these things are designed for, they're actually really good. One other day I took my bicycle instead of this just to the next village, and it took about 3 times as long and was obviously hard work. So it just shows that for what these things are designed for, they work really, really well. So on to number 3. This one's not such a positive one. I do think that 50cc isn't much power. Having that top speed of 30, fine round town and when there's lots of traffic about, but not so much once you get out of anything more than the 30 mile an hour limit. So as I said before, even just popping to the next village, it was fine, but I would choose my route to go on the smaller roads. Once you got onto a road that was even a 40 mile an hour limit or 50 mile an hour limit, then you were worried all the time. You were constantly checking your mirror for cars coming. Most cars were quite good and gave you a fairly wide berth. As you've seen with all of this stuff though, not every car's like that, and you do have a few worrying moments. I know the law says that 16-year-olds are going to have a 50cc rather than a 125. I actually think a 125 is much safer. And yes, it can do more speed. It can do sort of 50, 60 mile an hour. But I just think the advantages that gives you on A roads and even some B roads massively outweighs the sort of vulnerability and how dodgy you feel when you're only doing 30 mile an hour and a 60 limit and things are absolutely tanking past you.
So on to number 4. The 4th thing I've learnt is that they really don't like hills or wind. So say we're doing about 50k's along here, sort of maxed out as usual, absolutely fine, it's flat and there's a tiny bit of wind but not too much. As soon as you hit a hill, it suffers, and it suffers badly if it's a steep hill. So I've had some hills where I'm going along nicely, hit the hill, and I'm down to 20 kilometers an hour going up it. This is a 2-speed auto, so you can tell once it's getting too slow, it starts to struggle in second gear and knocks itself down into first, and all it seems to do is rev lots higher and only just do 20 and pull you up the hill. Wind, it's a super light bike as well, so this is only 50 k's, and 50cc's aren't always that light, but they do tend to be a lot lighter obviously, and the wind massively affects you. So if you ride into a headwind, again it's going to affect your speed massively, and because it is such a light bike, if you get a side wind it blows you all over. And that's something to be aware of that I'd sort of forgotten about from my 125 days, but this is even more so on a 50cc. So number 5 is a really nice one, and that is you feel included in the motorcycle community even on something like this. At least here in the Czech Republic I found that to be the case, that all motorcyclists still give you a wave, give you a nod when you meet up with people. For example, I did that distinguished gentleman's ride in Brno here in Czech, and I was really made to feel welcome and sort of part of the motorcycling gang even on something like this. So yeah, you're still part of that motorcycling community. So if you don't have any other options, say you're too young to be riding anything bigger, or you just fancy something that's a bit of fun, which is sort of, I've really enjoyed riding something very different, even though I'm used to much bigger bikes. I think the last bike I rode before I left England was 150 horsepower, and to put into perspective, this is 50cc's and 2.5 horsepower, and I've still had loads of fun. So yeah, so that whole feeling like a motorcyclist, the community behind that and the friendliness behind it is still there. So don't think you're going to be alienated by the bigger bikes, if that makes sense. So I hope this little video was useful for you. Do like and subscribe. It's not really the normal sort of thing I do. Normally it's reviews and things like that on bigger bikes, but I thought it was worth sharing this experience of a couple of months on something very different. But like I say, hope you found it useful, and see you again next week.